Hi Chris, how are you?
I'm alright, Rod. Good afternoon. It's my fault we're recording a bit early, so if there's any breaking news over the weekend, it will be on my head. Maybe Apple will buy Nintendo. That'd be a bit weird just before the Switch comes out.
That's our perpetual thing, but I don't think it's ever going to happen.
No, I don't think it's going to happen. And I don't think I would want it to happen. I like the Nintendo just the way they are, so let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I can feel some faith in buying stuff from a Japanese company rather than an American one currently.
Agreed. And Switch 2, look, we're about a week away from the Switch 2 coming out, so I'm going to have to wait slightly for mine. So I think I'm going to get it for my birthday, but I'm all right with that, but I'm quite excited.
Well, this will bring a thing. Will you use the Switch 2 more than you've used your Playdate?
I did find the Playdate while I tidied my office the other day. Not used it much. It may have to find its way onto eBay, as I'm on an eBay binge at the moment.
You were so excited about that as well.
I was, and it hasn't quite lived up to the hype. I think the lack of backlight and black and white only is just not done it for me.
Old school. No school like the old school. What's the weather like?
Hot. And as you know, just before we recorded, I had to just go and wedge my door open so it didn't bang, which is a problem we don't normally have when we podcast.
Hot. Good grief, man.
Hot. It's very hot. How is the weather with you?
Well, I'm wearing a fleece. For the YouTube viewers, that might answer all the questions about that. But yeah, I'm wearing a fleece. It's not hot.
I'm regretting wearing headphones. That's how hot it is.
How is it so hot there? You're only like on the other side of the river.
No idea. It's 21 degrees and it's beautiful. Rod, for the listeners, Rod looks properly shocked by this news.
we had like a sea mist. It was raining vaguely this morning. It's not hot.
Yeah, I live 2 hours from Rod in a car, roughly, and it's tropical here.
You don't live in a car, Chris. You live in a house.
No, but, 2 hours from you. It is fair. It's episode 175. It's the 30th of May, 2025, and we're about a week away from whatever Apple are going to announce at WWDC.
Yeah, more on that later. So should we just, having said all that, and we've got an even bigger preamble than usual, should we fire straight on and do some follow-up?
Let's do it.
Okay, top of the shop, not a surprise to anyone. The EU have come out and said, no, you're still in breach of the DMA. This is an article in 9to5Mac by Marcus Mendes from 27th. You're still in breach of the DMA. You now have 30 days to comply. It's a bit like the film Aliens. You have 5 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. They've had plenty of time to do something about it, and they haven't.
They haven't, and what gets me is they know the answer. The answer is, just do what you've done in America. This is what they want. They want developers to have freedom of choice for how you pay for things. Just you know the answer, Apple. You've done the answer. Just put the answer everywhere.
Most of the answer. I would argue that the DMA is more comprehensive than this, and they want access to APIs. They want other watchmakers to be able to take phone calls from Apple phones and their watches and all the rest of it. But they could certainly throw the EU a bone by doing the straight up and down thing of going, let them link out to other payment options then. Yeah,
that's the start, isn't it? And then obviously the DMA ultimately wants, other headphones to work in the same way and things. But that's deadline isn't today. So it is frustrating, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's very frustrating to watch them just continually bang their head off the ceiling. And, the EU have come out and said this, and Apple has responded going, the European Commission, where's the quote? I can't find the quote now. Has responded to the ruling with a statement provided in 9to5Mac calling it bad for innovation, bad for competition, bad for our products. Well, of course they are, because it's bad for your profits. So that's why you're saying all these things.
How is it bad for our users?
That is a very good question.
Yeah, I think this is the problem. I think Apple, you've died in a ditch on this one, not for the right reasons. You've got a weak argument. When the world's moved on, you need to move on now.
Yeah, we shall see, and I guess we'll talk about more in the main show. I guess as we run up to WWDC. But it is interesting that the €500 million fine, which I don't know if they've paid or not. I mean, probably not. I'm sure they're appealing against that. But this could have periodic penalties, even a percentage of their daily income that the EU could charge against.
Yeah, the EU fines are pretty exceptional when they start going. So you'd have thought Apple, considering they want to make all this money, you'd thought they'd want to pay less in fines. It feels wrong. In one hand, you're nickel and diming and trying to get every penny you can. In the other hand, you're just spending it on fines that you could have avoided.
Yeah, it's madness. And we saw this with the dating app in Denmark, 2.5 years ago now. They're quite happy to eat these fines for a significant period of time. But this is going to build up. We see it in Brazil, we see it in the EU, we see it with the Department of Justice in America, although who knows how that will go at this point. Saying that, they're not flavour of the month with the Trump administration currently, so that might go badly for them there too.
Yeah, this is true. Well, we'll probably come on to that in a minute, I think.
Yeah, let's move on and talk about another last week's stories, and this is Johnny Ive and Sam
Altman.
I want to say Alt Samman is what I was going to call him there, so that's not a good sign for my brain. But this was just an interesting bit of observation that, as I've heard other podcasts and people talking about this in the week, particularly Jason Snell on Upgrade and Marco Arment on ATP. Marco Arment thought this was going to be a great thing. Marco Arment thought that Sam was an amazing product guy, and I completely disagree with that assessment.
I think he thinks Sam will be to Johnny what Steve Jobs was to Johnny. You had Johnny, an amazing designer, but just needed somebody just to dial it in a little bit or be a bit more consumer focused or product focused, whatever you want to call that. And it felt like Johnny was missing that in his latter years at Apple. That was my understanding of the argument, and we ended up with some harebrained decisions, and he had too much control and not somebody, like an author needs a good editor, don't they? And he was missing his editor, was, to me, how I interpreted their piece. And maybe Marco feels that Sam Altman would be a good editor to Sir Johnny Ive.
So I think Steve Jobs had good products before Johnny Ive came along. We can look at the Next Cube, we can look at the original Macintosh, we can look at some of his decisions around that. Steve had ideas, and I think I'm going to use the vernacular. He kept it real. He understood what people wanted, I think. Not in terms of design, but what it should do. Not the way it looked, not always the way it functioned, but the fundamental core idea of a product. He had a very clear vision for that. And him and Johnny bounced off each other quite well in the early days, where to a certain degree, I agree with what you're saying, that maybe he reined back Johnny's thing. But in the early days of Johnny Ive, one of the best designers you could ever meet, whether that was tempered by Steve Jobs, whether that was tempered by the limitations of the software or design at the time is another thing. But I don't think anybody could argue, and this was Jason Snell's argument, coming onto that the 15 years where Johnny was untethered, probably not the best for Apple. All right, the iPhone went from strength to strength, but we lost ports, we had terrible keyboards, we had the Vision Pro with the screen on the outside. There's a whole sequence of decisions that actually somebody needed to tell Johnny no. I'm not sure Sam Altman is the guy to tell Johnny no.
Yeah, and that's it. They do very much seem on their honeymoon period at the moment, so it's going to be interesting to see how this goes and which one is mum and dad in this relationship. Who's going to be the authoritarian. I don't know the answer to that.
I got to think it's hard to say no to Johnny Ive. I mean, Sir Johnny Ive, he's all the successful products he's got. He can just point at the iPod, the iPhone, the redesigned iMac, all that stuff. Sam Altman uses a Mac. If you watch the video with him, he's quite happy with his MacBooks. He's going to defer to Johnny Ive, and you understand that. But coming back to it, what product has Sam Altman released other than a prompt to ChatGPT? It's not a product as such. It's an idea that I don't know if he even built. It's just something he believes in. He's really good at getting money. Absolute respect to the guy. He can sit down in front and he seems to have all the venture capital in the world coming at him. He talked his way back onto the board at OpenAI after all. But I don't see a product.
Do I see a product? I kind of agree with you. There's no hardware, obviously. But actually, if you go and use ChatGPT, it's not a bad place to go, is it? It's quite a nice website. It's easy to use, quite straightforward. It's well laid out. It's quite intuitive.
Do you think he did that?
As a prompt? I don't know. I don't know the answer. Like, how much input did he get into it, or did they just get the AI to come up with it? I don't know.
Have you ever run a local LLM on your computer?
Nope.
Right. So if you just go and download Olama, not right now while we're recording the podcast, install it, and run the command. There's 3 commands: Olama pull, you give it a model, and Olama serve, effectively, and then you just get a text prompt on your computer, and that text prompt is what you get on the ChatGPT website as much as anything else like that. So, all right, it's a very plain website. He, I don't think, is a web designer. He didn't do that. Anyway, maybe I'm not giving him enough credit. Maybe he has, from top to tail, designed the whole thing and the interface, and great. But that's a prompt on a web page. Google had a prompt on a web page. That's not a product. ChatGPT as a whole is a product. If your argument was he's parceled it all up and he's made an API and he's running all these companies, maybe the company and the sort of idea is the product, but I think they were just in the right place at the right time. What ChatGPT does, or OpenAI does, isn't that much different from Claude, Anthropic, Google, Gemini, Qwen, pick one.
Yep. But what they've done, though, it's kind of like Netflix, isn't it? They've got their name out there. They're the de facto one. When you talk to non-techie people, so if you ask my son what Claude is, probably show you a blank face. Whereas if you go ChatGPT, is, oh yeah, I know what that is. I use it all the time.
That's fair. So he's got a brand out there like Kodak.
It's got a good brand. Yeah. Well, Kodak's probably not a great one to use, but he's got a good brand, and they've lent into it. And sometimes the better brand isn't always the better product, but it's the one that's out there. And it is quite impressive. I think it is quite impressive what they've done, and it is quite straightforward to use.
Anyway, I share Jason's skepticism. I mean, the conversation on Upgrade between Mike and Jason, where Mike is super enthusiastic, he thinks this is great, he worships the ground pretty much that Johnny Ive walks on, he's always got something interesting to say, he thinks he's an amazing designer, blah, 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 which is fine. And I'm with Mike up to the point of the last 15 years with Apple. I think beyond that point, he's now, and again, I think Jason says this, he's now a super rich guy who designs super expensive products for rich people, and he's not keeping it real. Back to my point from there, where Steve Jobs, I don't think, ever lost that, no matter how much money he had. He always saw the point in the product, that the product had to serve a purpose.
I think Steve Jobs was always quite humble, didn't live in a big flash house, and do you know what I mean? Whilst he had lots of money and probably had yachts and stuff, it was actually relatively normal to a point. Go on.
And with the best will in the world, Steve Jobs was never normal, but I think he had an acute ability to observe what people needed in a product and what a product could do. Steve was mad. There's no denying. I mean, I don't think he was a very nice person to be around. You see the way that he treated his family and his daughter, and his approach to, I'm just eating apples for 6 months, that kind of thing. Steve Jobs was mad, but I think he had a very peculiar kind of madness that sort of turned into amazing products, and an amazing sense of people. And
I would agree with that.
He had that, they called it the reality distortion field. I think Sam Altman has a certain amount of the reality distortion field. That's how he gets money from people. But I remain to be convinced about the utility of the product. And just coming back to this thing, I remain to be convinced about why a pendant, a necklace, an earring, whatever this amazing thing is that they've done, is any better than a smartphone.
And I think that's where I got stuck. They see this is the third tier of products. You've got a MacBook in one hand and an iPhone in the other, and in your third hand you're going to have this, whatever this product is, and they're not trying to replace the phone with it, which I find interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, it's interesting, and I think it's a flash in the pan. Apparently, Federico Viticci said that's the end of Apple when this partnership was announced, and I think that's absolutely losing all perspective. This is an announcement. I don't think it's that major.
Not yet. The devil's going to be in the detail. Are they going to deliver this product, and are we going to want it? And is it going to be something that we're going to want to wear or have, like an Apple Watch as that extra device? I don't know. It's going to be curious. But we've got a quote coming up later from the Nothing CEO who thinks the future is an iPhone with one app on it, and maybe this is that. I can't see it myself, but maybe I'm missing something.
Well, with two responses to that before we move on. Do you still wear an Apple Watch?
I do not, and I haven't even got my mechanical one on at the moment because it's so hot. It's actually really hot. I often take my watch off when it's hot.
Yeah, and Humane Pin.
Agreed. That's it. But that was an awful product. But equally, I'm not sure I want a product that I haven't got a screen on it. I can't touch my photos, look at my photos, listen to my music, pick the album. Watch a video. You need something with a screen to do that.
Yep. People love their smartphones, and the second you're in any sort of crowded environment, a voice-only interface is useless.
And I don't want that distraction. I don't want it interrupting my music. I can, or my audio book or podcast, I can type whilst I'm listening, and it don't have that interruption. So yeah. I'm curious to see where this is going to go.
And you don't want to be that guy on the train blasting out your Sam and Johnny device. No. Why do people put speakerphone on in crowded environments walking down the street? I don't understand it. We better move on, otherwise we'll be stuck here forever. Very quickly, Apple has hiked its iCloud and Apple One subscription prices in Brazil. I wonder if this is just natural selection or a response to the fact that Brazil is going to force sideloading.
I don't know. There was talk about this being because of the currency rates and the exchange rates, but Apple haven't explained why they've done it, which is really bizarre. So is it because they're annoyed at Brazil, or is it because the exchange rates and this is just normal business practice? I don't know.
prices go up, I guess. It could just be just the timing of it seems interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah, especially with all the recent shenanigans in Brazil.
It invites conspiracy theory. Something that doesn't invite conspiracy theory is an app I'm sure you use every single day. How are you getting on with Apple's Invites app?
If I want to invite somebody to do something, I just text them.
Yeah, I used it once to send a thing to you that you didn't respond to. I think I may have deleted it, actually. I'm not even aware that you look surprised that I did send you an invite for something.
I've got so many notifications turned off, I probably missed it.
It's a rubbish app. It's a rubbish app that's had an update that has got a couple of bug fixes, a performance improvement, and no new features. Well done, Apple. Well done, Apple.
I do think sometimes these apps would be better if it was a one-person team building it, and they would get more updates more in there because they weren't Apple just moving at a snail's pace.
Isn't this a calendar invite?
Yeah, I don't get why this all isn't in calendars, to be honest. It feels like another reason to get you to buy iCloud Plus.
It's absolute rubbish, and frankly, the last couple of apps from Apple have been absolute rubbish. And I include Apple Music Classical in there too.
Classical's all right, but it's just files save as music save as classical.
It's unnecessary. It's absolutely unnecessary. Fair enough. Let's move on and go back to AI for a little bit because that's always juicy. I just thought this was an interesting little story from a company called Pen Test Partners, which they published in the week. And it's quite nice. They've got their own too long didn't read on here as well. So this is, if you've got access to a SharePoint website and you've got access to Microsoft Copilot, what can you do? So it turns out you can do quite a lot. So Copilot for SharePoint is Microsoft's answer for generative AI. Attackers will look to exploit things because you might have things preventing passwords within files on SharePoint, but you can ask Copilot to go off and look through the other files that may not have passwords attached to them, where developers may have stored passwords or clues to passwords inside of the SharePoint files. So basically, you've gifted people a hacking environment into which they can pull out all the details they'd want to do. Do you think they thought about that?
I think they have thought about it, and they've certainly been messaging IT admins when you move to SharePoint. You need to think about this sort of stuff because a lot of people have moved to SharePoint and they've just lifted up all the data they've got and dropped it into SharePoint. Then at some point in the journey, they've then gone and bought Copilot. And then if you're a bit savvy and you've got access to some data, you can then start getting Copilot to sift through it for you. Copilot, go find me all the documents that are password protected. Copilot, go find me all the passwords you can. You can get really savvy with it. So this way you can then turn legacy data, I think, in and then modern application of how it's stored and how you can interact with it into hacking. And this is a real problem for a lot of companies because how many companies have moved to SharePoint? And I reckon recently, especially in the UK, a lot of people have done it because it's largely free, for a certain amount of storage with your Microsoft agreement. You can then bolt it into Copilot. You're then using it with your Teams client. It's huge. This is a real big risk for a lot of companies.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it. How many admins understand the impact of what it is that they're doing? Their boss or their employees are telling them they want the new cool thing. They flick on the switches and there you go. You just get access to it. And I see, even within our environment, that Zoom, for example, now automatically records meetings using AI and will give you updates and snapshots of what's going on. Presumably that's in free text stored somewhere, like in a vault or a cloud or something like that, but I don't actually know. I spend all my time looking how to switch these things off because I don't want them. And that is just becoming slop that's in everything that we use. It's in Teams, it's in Slack, it's in SharePoint, it's in whatever your Zoom meetings, all the rest of it. It's all built into it now. And I really don't think people are thinking of the consequences of where this is stored. What are you saying? The example in this Pen Test Partners of, do any files in SharePoint contain our naming conventions or service accounts? And then Copilot goes through and tells them. So you're very quickly getting pointers for what's happening. And unless you're an on-the-ball administrator or happen to be looking at these files at the same time, you may never be aware of this.
I'd agree with you there. And I think this is a real concern. When I've had pen tests done in the past, we've often directed them towards more of our high-value assets they wouldn't know. But in this scenario, if you haven't got that insider information, you can just go and get it. Yeah. I think this is a big risk for a lot of companies. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is going to be an attack vector that we're going to see exploited in the relatively near future.
Yeah, I mean, traditional pen testing is here's all of our endpoints for our web products, databases, blah, blah, blah. Have at it. It's not the once you get in. I mean, there is a get in potentially if there's known vulnerabilities for any of your things. But this is a thoughtful step above that based on using technology that's coming along. And presumably, script kiddies are going to be able to write some amazing denial of service attacks, man-in-the-middle attacks, and all that kind of stuff, making use of Copilot-like tools.
Yep. I think anybody remotely interested in this should go read this article. It's very long, but actually I've seen this. I think it is actually really well done.
It's well written as well.
Yeah, agreed.
Moving on. Do you want to tell us what the CEO of Nothing said?
So the CEO of Nothing, and you've probably told me this before, but I didn't realise Nothing is a British company, so that passed me by. So interestingly, the CEO of Nothing thinks that Apple have lost its creative, it's not creative anymore. And he's also saying that the future of the smartphone is one single app, which is obviously what I just referenced with the OpenAI and Johnny Ive's AO company coming together, in that that's maybe how they see the future. That's not, as we've just discussed, not a future I want, but it's interesting how they're saying Apple's got no creativity now, and obviously they're just hand cranking out new models of iPhone which look quite similar. And I think for the first time ever, I'm not in a rush to upgrade my iPhone, other than one of my children wants to have a phone with a better battery, which I think is interesting. They're being called out by another CEO of going, Apple, the most creative, forward-thinking company that's skating to where the puck's going, not where it is, isn't there at the moment. I'm not sure we disagree. I think on the Mac side, they've certainly sorted it out and they've got to a good place, but none of what they've done on the Mac is really that revolutionary. All they've done is gone back to where they were, in essence. They've just done away with all the Johnny Ive mistakes that we've talked about, the rubbish keyboards, the lack of ports. My thing of the week's going to be interesting later when we get to it, because it's something that they reintroduced. And then you've got Nothing coming along and doing something quite different, and it does actually look quite a compelling product.
I agree with almost everything you said. I mean, this one app to do all of the things thing, if you'll recall, is what Elon said he wanted to do. Because in China, it doesn't matter what smartphone you buy, you log into, I forget the name of the app, the Line app or whatever it is, that might be the Japanese one. But you buy things in there, you talk to your friends in there, you file for your taxes in there, you do all that kind of stuff all in one app. And you can see with AI and agents coming along how that one app becomes ever more powerful. It can just hook into a web service. You order your Uber through the one thing, you pay for it inside of that thing, you locate where your friends are, and that's the dream for... Not for me, but it's the dream for, if you are Elon Musk or you are whoever's designing one of these things, the hardware then becomes, it doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter if it's a Samsung or an iPhone or, a Huawei or something like that. It's the app that matters, as long as you can get that on there. And for somebody like Nothing, the hardware probably helps. But I think he's right. You and I have noticed, we just talked about an Apple app, for goodness sake, that neither of us are interested in. We're both not particularly interested in the next round of of iPhones this year, because what we've got is good enough. Unless we're very, very surprised by something that comes along hardware-wise, then I don't need a thinner phone. I want a better battery in my phone. I don't want it to be thinner. I think it's thin enough.
I'm kind of with you. I just want a light phone. I'm largely there. I'm more looking to buy myself a phone because I will pass my phone down the line. And I've got a few quid in I've traded in some equipment that I've mentioned on the show, so I've got some money sat there. So if I go and buy a new phone, I've got a bunch of money off it. But some of the stuff, looking at the Nothing site that you've got up at the moment, looks quite cool what they're doing with it. It's interesting.
I agree with you. I mean, there's two things, isn't there? There's the walled garden that we live in, the fact that it works with our Macs, it's what we're used to, it runs the software we want, yada, yada, yada. But I'm also not out for 1,100 quid for another phone, excluding tariffs. Whereas this, I think, is 299 quid, 299.99, so it's 300 quid phone. It's got a 30 times zoom, it's got a 50 megapixel lens on it, it's got 32 megapixel front end, it runs the latest version of Android, it'll presumably get updates for years, it's got a very powerful processor, if you can live with it, and a 5,000 milliamp hour battery as well, by the way, which probably fast charges. So there's nothing wrong with that. That is a lot of phone for not a lot of money, that if you don't really care because you got it to run at the one app, or even, let's face it, most of the apps we want these days, what's the harm,
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I've never used a Nothing phone, but that's quite a compelling pitch they've got.
Fair play. And isn't it nice to see a British phone manufacturer? I mean, it's Android and all the rest of it, but it's nice to see a British phone manufacturer.
Yeah, agreed. That would make me come round to it, I think.
Really? That's interesting. Bit of national pride there, eh?
Bit of national pride. I sound like Donald Trump now.
Let's talk about national pride, actually, in our next story. So this was in The Verge and was featured in mainstream media as well. It's quite interesting, the American definition of censorship, isn't it? That the US has now come out and said, and this, I think it was the FBI deputy director who said this, that the US will deny visas to foreign officials, it says censor social media. So this, they think, relates back to a couple of stories. Last year, or a couple of years back, when the UK was having riots around the country based on the Southport stabbings, I think is what the initiating event was. They were unhappy with the UK government's potential reaching out to Elon and others to stop this content spreading because it was causing discontent. The US views that as censorship, and some of EU governments have said this as well when you're spreading hate crimes and things like that without it. And the US views all this as, sorry, it was Marco Rubio said this, it wasn't the deputy director of the FBI. But I think this is an odd perspective on censorship.
Yeah, I'm with you. It is an odd perspective. There's a lot of odd stuff going on at the moment, but I completely agree with you. Never up until recently have I worried about travelling to a foreign country, but it now feels like we should be more worried about this.
I mean, I sort of buried the lead here a little bit. That basically any officials of other countries that have made attempts to ban particular speech on American networks will be denied access to the United States. I mean, that's the point of this story. So in that example, Keir Starmer wouldn't be allowed to travel to the United States because he'd called on Elon Musk to stop spreading hate crimes on X. And all this is a bit sticky for me because, as some EU officials have pointed out, US sites often block material that is censored in Europe, such as that isn't censored in Europe, such as discussions about euthanasia, nude artworks, particular books, calling Trump a taco, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you've seen that in the news this week, but apparently the new word for Trump is taco. Trump always caves. Is the thing.
Wow.
Because all of his tariffs and everything, he's always caved in when it's come to it. And a journalist asked him about this yesterday, and he was not impressed. So, I think what one country views as censorship is not what another does. But America's the land of free speech, right? So.
Yes, quite. I think we've got a quote coming up actually on the Truth platform, haven't we?
Yeah, we do.
Which I've never seen until I clicked that link.
Oh, it's the first time ever I've linked to one of Donald Trump's truths.
Yep. No, I thought it was quite interesting.
I can be balanced. No censorship here. Should we do some news?
Let's do some news.
So sad news for fans of particular apps. Mozilla, who run the Firefox browser and Thunderbird web client and things like that, are shutting down Pocket. Pocket was a read it later app, like a bookmarking app, something particularly you saw on Firefox or other apps. It was an iOS app, it was an Android app. You could save that content for later and even read it offline. Did you ever use Pocket?
No, I've never really got into a read it later app, if I'm being honest. But I'm a bit sad about this because I thought it was quite nice that it found a home with Mozilla. But equally, I can understand that maybe they are jettisoning things that aren't really their core business. And you see this with a lot of companies. They get big, they focus on too many things, and then they have to dial it back in. So I kind of understand why they're going this way.
I think it's a very particular kind of person wants a read it later app. If you think Marco Arman's app, Instapaper went the same way. They sold it off because it was really no traction in it, in that sort of bookmark it and get offline, because nobody's really offline anymore. Even on flights and things these days, you're not offline.
Yeah, it made sense. There was a window of opportunity when it made sense, and he probably offloaded that app at the right time as user numbers were probably declining.
Yeah. Anyway, pour one out for Pocket. It's going. I did make use of Pocket when I went all in on Firefox briefly, but I'd rather maintain my own bookmarks and links as we do for this podcast. So my requirements aren't quite this, and I do feel a bit sad for it because it was a purchase by Firefox, by Mozilla. It could have done really well. Like you say, I think it had that brief opportunity to shine, but it's just another thing in the background that's going away.
Yep, and like I say, I get why they're letting it go, because they've got to focus on their core business right now.
They do. Something else that's going away, I've recommended on this podcast, it's been a previous app of the week, is the browser company who made a Chromium-based browser called Arc. They are killing that as well. So for whatever reason, it didn't get the uptake, probably because it's just another Chromium-based browser. And they're launching Dia, which is an AI-based platform product thing instead, because of course it is. I think it's a bit sad. Arc was really well received. Lots of influencers and bloggers and people started using it. It's nice to see different spins on Chrome, although they are all just Chrome. But why would you trust this company if they just kill their products this quickly and move on?
That is a concern. Also, the name Dire is a bit unfortunate in English-speaking language. I don't know what it means in other languages, but in our language, dire, I know it's spelled differently, but dire normally means bad. If you're in a dire place, you're in a bad place. So it's a bit unfortunate, I think, the name. It's a shame they're killing their product and they're, like I say, focusing on AI only. I get that's where we're going, but I don't know. It felt like there could be a nice way of transitioning. And why haven't they just morphed Arc into the AI-focused product? Why are they starting again? I find that a bit odd because Arc had got a bit of a name and a reputation, as you've said. So it seems odd that they're going to just let that burn and go do something else.
Yeah, they're very sort of shape-focused, aren't they? Dia, Arc. I just want to throw out there for people who don't know, there's a really, really good open-source diagramming thing, a bit like OmniGraffle, where you could snap shapes together if you're trying to make your sort of flowcharts and all the rest of it, called Dia. And that's the first thing I thought about. I mean, naming things is hard, isn't it? That's why we went through the Web 2.0 area of things not having vowels in them. But there's already a couple of things called Dia.
I just don't think it's a great name. Arc was, I thought, a really good name. I don't get why they're not just calling it Arc AI browser or and morphing that forwards. But there you go.
And in the third thing to go away, all of it's not going away, but Brent Simmons, who writes it, kind of is. Brent Simmons, who wrote NetNewsWire, a really interesting guy, a really interesting product, long-time Mac developer, wrote one of the first RSS readers for the Mac and iOS. It's been around 20 plus years at this point, possibly longer. He sold it. He bought it back. It's been a whole saga. Anyway, Brent announced his retirement this week. He says his retirement will mean more stuff for NetNewsWire. It's not going to go away. But it is interesting when you think of how many of our products are run by one person or a company of people that are getting older and older. BB Edit is another great Mac app that springs to mind that, a very small team maintain that. What happens when the architects move on? And they're so closely allied with it.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. What's interesting with NetNewsWire is, Brent's done it for a long time. He's very respected in the community. I think he ended up at Audible for a period of time and was working on their iOS app. And that's possibly where he's just retired from. It's super interesting. But it probably gives him more time to work on some of his passion projects. And look, somebody who's just left their job, I kind of get it because I'm having some time to work on some things I've wanted to do for a while.
That's a major announcement for us now. Nobody, the listeners don't know about that, do they?
I guess not. I've left my job. Tomorrow's my last day of being employed, and for a short period I'm going to be independent, and whether that goes on further I don't know yet. Let's see how it goes.
See, that should have been the main show. That's for the second time this week we've buried the lead, Chris.
It's all right. It's quite minor, isn't it? I'm just going to be jobless for a period of time until I'll see what happens.
Well, we probably need to talk about that down the line, but we wish you well in your future endeavours, and maybe we'll see some apps out of you as a consequence.
That's what I'd love to do. So my time is quite good for WWDC, which we're going to talk about, and I'm trying to get an app out the door before then, if I can, just to demonstrate that I can do it and give myself some confidence.
So let's talk about Trump, because we haven't for 5 minutes, so I think it's really important to do so. There was this announcement in the week that Donald Trump wasn't happy with Apple, and I'm trying to load up 2 stories here. And the first one came about in one of his, I don't know what you call them, truths? Are they truths from the Truth Social Network? They probably go. Yeah, I don't really care. I was
going to use a different word, but this is the first time I've ever seen Truth Social, so you've taken me to a new place today.
Yeah, it's one I'd rather not be in myself, but I can't think what they've copied to come up with this basic outline. Anyway, Donald J. Trump has truthed, whatever he's done, become upset at Tim Cook because iPhones aren't being made in the United States of America, and I think Apple thought they'd done a clever thing. I can't look at this page anymore. I'm going to flip off it. Apple thought they'd done a clever thing by moving some of their production to India, and it was going to get around some of the tariffs. So at the point China were on 154% tariffs, they could ramp up production in India that were only subject to 25% tariffs, or possibly less, and get the phones in America. Anyway, in that truth, Donald Trump makes it obvious that he's really unhappy about Apple trying to get around this. He wants iPhones made in America now, goddammit! So that's not going to happen for lots of reasons that we've talked about in this podcast ad nauseum. But the sort of most petty man-baby kind of way, and I'm sorry, I can't phrase it in any other way than that, is apparently this came about because Tim Cook didn't come to the Middle East with him, as some of the other big tech CEOs did. So Donald had a strop, and Apple are going to hit 25% taxes as a consequence of not going along on a jolly.
I don't know what to say on this. It all seems very bizarre. I get that Apple were, playing to the rules, as it were, to make that work. But equally, you've obviously got a big iPhone window coming up in September. We're the end of May now. It's not gonna happen overnight to move production from A to B. There needs to be a degree of pragmatism here, does there not?
You would have thought so. The problem is, I don't think there is any pragmatism. It's all about the show. And if you read the other tech CEOs that went, including Sam Altman, went to the Middle East with Trump, you're either with him or against him. And I don't think there's any in-betweens. As we see with Elon Musk, and we're going to talk about that as well, I think, later on, that if you're not immediately in a sphere of influence and telling him how great he is, then you get this kind of kickback. And that's fine if that's the way he wants to run America. He's the president. He can do what he likes from that point of view, although not always when it comes to the courts, it seems, currently. But this is going to damage anybody that's not in his immediate wheelhouse. If he's just so fickle as to go off Apple because of not coming on a trip, maybe there's something deeper and we just don't know about that. That's a problem. But it's really going to hit Apple. I mean, Apple will just have to absorb these tariffs because they're not allowed to say phones are getting expensive because of the tariffs, because you're not allowed to do that either. So they're kind of devil in the deep blue sea here.
It feels to me, though, like Apple's having a bit of comeuppance because developers couldn't tell people why you're paying more on the App Store, 30% more because of Apple's fees, and now they're getting clobbered by the US government for the same thing. The whole thing is it's just insane, and the stock price is going up and down. I don't know how companies are reacting to this because you're trying to operate with the knowledge you have that day, and then the next day it's all changed again.
Yeah, but Trump always chickens out, so, we'll have to see how that goes. But I don't know that I feel bad for Apple. I think you reap what you sow, and Tim chucking him $1 million and the other CEOs chucking $1 million, I think they hoped they'd get on his good side and all would be well, but how long does that last? Not very, it seems. Yeah,
I'm not sure that's done anything, has it really?
No. Something else that I doubt very much will do anything, and this is a report in Engadget from 25th of May, is Texas is going to try and ban everybody from accessing social media under the age of 18. How do you enforce something like this?
How do you enforce it? 18 feels a bit high. I don't know. In this day and age, my kids use bits of it. I don't know. I don't know how I feel. I'm not a social media person, so ban me. I probably would feel zero impact from it. But it seems unfair to ban kids from something like that, and young adults.
Well, you're an old man at this point, Chris. I mean, let's face it.
This is true.
Kids start using social media much, much younger than they did.
Yeah, 100%. I can see it with my own children.
And I'm willing to accept the argument that probably too young, but at the same time, 18. I mean, they can start driving at 16. Presumably, they can join the army at 18 in the United States. Who knows what else is legal in the United States? But in this country, you can drink at 18. 18 seems old. You're an adult at the point you're 18. Frankly, you're an adult at the point of 16 in many cases. This is dodgy law, I think. I mean, you can see won't somebody think of the children argument, that they're potentially being exposed to child grooming, child sexual abuse material, things like that, scams, all the things that all the rest of us are sort of potentially at risk over the internet, but because you haven't got that build-up. But you and I have talked about this before, and I always think it just comes back to education. It's not about banning things. It's about making people aware and children aware of the inherent risks and how to be safe.
Yeah, so we've largely let our children pick what they want to do. If they want to join Instagram, crack on. If they want to go on WhatsApp, that's up to you. But you act on it, and everything you write down may well come back and bite you. And they've actually, a lot of them have made quite interesting decisions to come off these things, because I don't need my phone blowing up because somebody invited 10,000 people to a chat. So it's quite interesting, some of the decisions they're making on their own. Equally, I think if you keep young adults off this, what they can do for their businesses, you're seeing kids and young adults get into business a lot younger now. I think you'll stop some of that, and social media is part of our world. And yeah, I'm probably the tech person in my family, and I'm not on social media. It's not for me, but I appreciate I'm an anomaly, unlike the rest of my family.
You want to get out there. I think, if you're putting your CV around, you got to be out there. You got to be on your LinkedIn's, and you got to be on your all the rest of it.
I do a bit of LinkedIn, and that's it. But
that's
only because I have to.
That's social media.
I know, but I'm not doing it I guess I'm doing it for work, not for pleasure. That's probably my
It's a terrible
distinction.
platform for work or for pleasure. It's a terrible platform.
Sometimes the lines blur with LinkedIn, I've noticed.
I'm going to move on because I can't cope with it. But anyway, I think this is a bad law that hasn't been passed yet, but if it's passed, it will be bad, and it will be trivial for a tech-savvy kid to get around this.
I think if you said you're going to ban it till they're 14, I could probably get behind it. I think 18's a bit far. And I've just picked 14 as an arbitrary number, but...
Do you need like a driving license for social media that they need to pass before they're allowed on there?
I think it's one you could argue either way, and both be right.
Should we do some pre-WWDC rumours instead?
Let's do it.
First up, Apple is going to include a new app dedicated to gaming. Whoa.
What, like Game Center that they used to have 10 years ago, and they got rid of it weirdly, and now it's a nothing.
Isn't it weird being an Apple watcher for a few years where you just watch these things come round and round and round? You know, we're gonna have Game Center. We're rededicating to games. There's going to be game developers on the stage at WWDC, which are always the most boring and tedious demos there anyway.
And there's a game from years ago.
Saying that, Apple are quite good at the tedious and boring demos themselves these days. You know, the chip stuff's interesting, and there'll be an interesting thank you to developers, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway, yeah, they're going to try and do Game Center again, it would seem.
I don't get why Apple just haven't gone and bought a game studio. Go and get somebody that knows what they're doing, because you've never got games. You need somebody reporting into Tim Cook that she's senior vice president of gaming on Apple platforms, all platforms, and all they're doing is running a business to engage with developers to get their games on your devices, all your platforms. You've never done it. You need to do it. Why haven't you just gone and bought somebody? All these studios are out there, or these great companies that do this stuff, or go and get some exec from Sony or Xbox, but you haven't done it, and you've got all the money, and yet you just never quite get gaming. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, with the exception of Nintendo, I think Sony and Microsoft are struggling in gaming. Mobile gaming is very much where it's at because everybody's got one in their pocket, and I bet on the App Store it's the thing that makes them the most money, and that's probably why they keep coming out of it.
100%, and to a degree, Nintendo have got it right, haven't they? Because they've nailed mobile gaming and television gaming in a wanna. It's quite interesting their play, and possibly why the Switch 2 looks like the Switch 1, because they've actually got it right.
I don't know. I mean, I think people buy Nintendos because of the games.
I think there's two things in it. For me, anyway, I've got one coming, as we discussed. I think it's two things. One, the properties. You've got some amazing property they own. Mario, Zelda. I'm not a big Zelda person, but I know others are. You've got Metroid and all of their universes, and Donkey Kong. They've got those. But equally, I think they make nice hardware. They support it for a long period of time. You know, what did the Switch turn? Nearly 10 years old, I think. And the new OS has just come out for it very recently, so that it's compatible with the Switch 2. They've just introduced this virtual games cards that we spoke about, and that's backwards compatible. I think they've done a great job there. But equally, I can then dock the thing and play with my kids on the big telly, and we can have 4-player, or I can take it on the plane and play 2-player. You know, for the kind of casual gaming that I do, for me, it's probably the right console.
Yeah, and you can see they're obviously been influenced by Nintendo. It'll have integration with FaceTime and iMessage, so you can see if your friends are online and all the rest of it. And yeah, it might work for the kids. It's certainly the function I'm not going to use if I do get a Switch 2 at some point. But I mean, I don't think we need to go on about this ad nauseum. They're going to try again. And what you said a minute ago is absolutely right. Unless they give it the focus. For TV and movies, they got a TV and movie guy who knew Hollywood inside and out, or guys, or team, and got content and made it a success, and they've never done that with gaming, and that's the only way this is going to work. But I think the problem for somebody who would be that team of people who get gaming is Apple will lose interest in it in 5 minutes. That's all they've ever done.
And you'd have thought Apple, being a computer company, would have got gaming before it got films and TV.
They've had all the chances over the years to do so. You know, they've had moments in the sun where they could have been the dominant gaming platform, and they've never got it because they will not commit, and they won't commit again.
Yeah, and it's a shame because they've got some fantastic hardware. They've got platforms in so many people's hands that will do this. And you wouldn't go and buy a Vision Pro for gaming, but you would go and get a 200 quid Meta to go and do the equivalent.
Imagine they had exclusive GTA 6 Apple TV.
Done.
Done. That would be their launch into gaming. They need bigger discs on their Apple TVs. But
well, you'd have to buy the new Apple TV that comes with the controller, and you get GTA 6 on it. You would shift millions of the things.
You'd instantly rocket to the top of the thing. Anyway, let's keep with the rumors. This was a bit of a surprise in the week, wasn't it? So, 29th of May, Apple announced. Well, it didn't announce that Apple is rumored. That we're going to switch away from being iOS 19 to be iOS 26, and in order to line up with the years, we're going to jump from 19 to 26, 27, 28. That's the plan.
And they're also going to do this for all their OSs, iOS, macOS, Watch, because it's been a nightmare, like which WatchOS version corresponds with which iOS and macOS version, and now Vision, obviously. This is a no-brainer, and they're using car years, so they're going to launch it at the end of 25, but it will be called 26. Kind of makes sense. It will be active for the majority of 26. So you can see why they're doing it. And bikes do it, cars do it. Let's get it done. So this feels like the right move. Hopefully they're going to call their iPhones the same numbers, but that remains to be seen. I reckon they will. If they're doing the OSs, I reckon they do the phones at the same time.
I think it would make sense too. It could get messy quickly. I'm running iOS 26 on a 25, or something like that. It could get a little bit messy. And the other thing I think will be messy is all the identifiers within Xcode and places like that I know how messy the device names are at the moment. Summer 24 bracket second revision, all the commas and things they put in it. I think that unifying thing will be laudable, but I can't believe they'll do it in every single element of every single coding platform they've got. It's going to be messy for a while. But in general, I'm okay with it. It'd be quite nice just to say, the 26 version of the OS, and it'd be the tvOS, watchOS, iPadOS, whatever.
Yep. No, I agree with you. I think it will be good. I think they've actually got better with some of the naming conventions. Now they've just started naming them after the chip that's in it. I think that's helped because their chips are nice and short now. You got the M1 or the the A17 Pro, I think is what they called the iPad Mini recently. So I think their hardware's got better. Maybe this is what they need to do for software.
We'll see. Anyway, a rumour, not an announcement. Sticking with rumours, not announcements, apparently it's going to become easier to support transferring eSIMs from Android to iPhone and vice versa. And this is a no-brainer. You should be able to move between platforms.
Agreed, but I think there's enough problems just moving iPhone to iPhone eSIMs, as I think you and I have both found out to our detriment.
Yeah,
this needs to get easier if people, if we're going to be forced to be eSIM only.
And just as an aside, most UK carriers still don't support eSIMs, and most UK carriers still don't support RCS messaging. So I think they've got bigger problems. At some point, I'm sure they want to release iPhones into the UK and other markets that are eSIM only. But most of our carriers don't support that, and that's a problem.
I find that bizarre they don't. You can see the way the direction's going. I find it bizarre that they're not doing it. We're all eSIMs only in our house, and it's been okay.
There's 4 phones in this household, 1 is an eSIM.
I do wonder whether the iPhone 17 Air will be eSIM only.
I'm not going to be buying an iPhone 17 Air, so I won't care.
I might do.
We've just had the discussion. Should we do a very rapid car corner?
Yep.
Okay, so first off, and in no surprise to anyone, apparently Tesla's in big trouble. Their sales are falling all over the place. Apparently they've fallen 49% in the EU year on year for the month of April. They only logged 7,261 vehicle registrations with the European automobiles manufacturer, half of what it needed to, and that's in light of them having put out a new model, the new Tesla Model Y as well. So that seems to me like Tesla are in big problem. And the crucial thing is the rest of the EV market grew. Tesla sank, but every other EV manufacturer sold more EVs.
Yeah, I wonder why this is. It's not a good look, is it? Everybody else is caught up with Tesla's way of doing things to a point. I'm not saying that was good, but I wouldn't rush out and buy a Tesla. I've never liked their styling. It's not been for me, but it just looks very plain. It's the problem I have with them. But this has dropped way more than I would have anticipated.
Well, is it? I mean, I did see a good comment the other day about how Elon was going to destroy Apple's stock market, and some commenter said, "Why is he going to buy them?" Because that's kind of what he's done with X, and that's what's going on with Tesla. And with the exception of Starlink and SpaceX, you kind of see that.
Yeah, you do kind of see it. And he's the richest man in the world, but yet manages to tank brands. It's quite interesting.
I mean, just to point out something that you said there, that you'd never fancied a Tesla, and this changed the second I went to the blooming website, but other car manufacturers are copying that Tesla style, that sort of look of the Tesla Model 3 and the rest of it, which are made in China. This is the BYD. I think this is the Seal. I forget, or it might be the Atto. I'm not good with their names. But if you look twice at that, you'd go, isn't that a Tesla Model 3? So that's sort of...
I completely agree with you. That to me looks like a new Model 3.
Yeah, but that is a BYD something or other, right? Massive. I think they're the biggest growing car manufacturer in the world at the moment, BYD. Build your dreams. I have seen them on the roads in the UK. Think reasons like this, that I think they're £10,000 cheaper than Tesla, although maybe not, because the discounting on Teslas is pretty high at the moment. You know, they're well reviewed, they're good enough. Why would you buy a Tesla when the brand is associated with that man? It's a serious problem, and the only way, and I see parallels in Apple. Tim Cook has become the face of failing Apple, failing in scare quotes. But that sort of stickiness is there. Do you have to get rid of the CEO to save the brand?
It's a bit like the artist and the art, isn't it? The thing is, Tesla had a really strong brand, especially here in the UK. It was really strong for quite a long time, and they were very desirable cars. And they've now squandered that. So, do you need to change the person at the top, and does he need to become a silent partner? And that's maybe what needs to happen.
Some brands are forever tarnished. I mean, I had a Tesla. I wouldn't buy another one.
Yeah, so yeah, would I ever go back? I wouldn't say never, because 10 years, 20 years is a long time. And a lot could happen in that time. But I wouldn't rush to buy one in the near term at all.
And related to this is that it looks like Elon and the Donald's relationship is kind of falling apart. So his work is done with the Department of Government Efficiency, and he's stepping away from the White House. So this is linked here just as maybe this is the only way he does it. He has to distance himself from this. But most people have got longer memories to think, okay, but this is the guy who took over Twitter and trashed it. This is the guy who put hundreds of millions of dollars into getting voters to vote Republican and all the rest of it. And as we said before, his base is a very left-wing base. That they're going to remember this kind of stuff. It's not going to help the brand of Tesla or Starlink or others that he is associated with it for what he's done. And the very image of this story, and for those who aren't watching the podcast, this is his infamous salute at the Republican when Trump was being sworn in. I think they call it a Roman salute, but let's call it what it is. He did a Nazi salute twice on the stage. That is now the brand. I know that's what he is associated with. And if you ever wanted a toxic relationship between a brand and a person, and this is what Tesla's suffering from, I think, are old cars not updated sufficiently, software's good, people don't like them for the styling, and then you've got that sitting over the top of them, and that's a perfect storm for a brand.
I think a lot of people put up with the styling because of what you got. You got this great infrastructure, software, charge network, and people put up with it. Maybe this is now a step too far in the association. Because you see people with stickers on the back going, I bought this before Elon was Elon, kind of thing. I'm not surprised, but it'll be interesting to see what happened. Is Elon still going to be CEO of Tesla at the end of the year?
They're very efficient cars that go a long way with a great charging network, but the problem is the sort of association there. So
agreed.
Yeah. Anyway, should we do some media?
Yeah, let's do some media. I like media.
Let's do some media. I did Mission Impossible 3 on my continuing watch through the Mission Impossible films. So much better than Mission Impossible 2. You can see this is the genesis of where Mission Impossible sort of reinvented itself and went forward. Really, really good. Thoroughly enjoyed it. You can see the critics and audience responses are better than Mission Impossible 2, that's for sure. Hadn't realised, directed by Brad Bird.
I was just about to ask who the director was. It is Brad Bird, who did The Incredibles.
He did. No, it's a good film. Stunts in it are great. It really rips along. Philip Seymour Hoffman is the bad guy in it. Really good bad guy, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Sadly missed, unfortunately.
Agreed, I always liked him.
Yeah, so I tell a lie. It was J.J. Abrams. Brad Bird must have been the scriptwriter or something. That doesn't seem right. I'm sure it said Brad Bird on the one I watched. I'm going to have to look into that. Also featuring Billy Crudup, went on to be in The Morning Show, Apple TV+.
Fantastic in The Morning Show.
He's a great character. Good. He normally plays a good sleazeball of some sort.
He's a good weasel in The Morning Show.
Yeah, but I thoroughly enjoyed Mission Impossible 3. Great stunts, great sequences. And Mission Impossible 4, which I've got next, is where Tom Cruise is climbing the Burj Khalifa. So,
yeah, this is probably where I get hazy after 3. So I'm going to do what you're doing at some point and start working my way through them. I'm curious to know whether my kids will want to watch them, but I doubt it.
yeah, I think you'll struggle with 2.
2 is just very off the moment, wasn't it?
It certainly was. I'm struggling with an ad blocker now, so I think we'll move on. Have you managed to catch, new to Apple TV, any Murderbot?
I started, but I must confess I struggled with Murderbot. And I think I've ruined you because I've put lots of links in now for Rotten Tomatoes because I quite like looking at that. So I started watching Murderbot. The reviewers have given it 97% rating. The audience have given it 80%. I just don't know. I don't know whether it was a bit slow, whether it was the concept. I don't know. I didn't really warm to it. Now, whether I'm going to have another run at it, I will see. But I was just a bit disappointed. How are you getting on with it?
I'm really enjoying it. I think it is a different pace than you'd expect. But I think the cast is very, very good. The jokes are quite funny. I can see the tension beginning to build in it. I can't look at this ad anymore, so here's an IMDb link instead. I quite like it. I got to say, it's got things of merit. It's quite an interesting world they're building. Feels a bit Firefly-y for those that know Firefly. Sort of corporations are the people who are in charge, and you've got to buy everything off them to go forward. And there hasn't been a rebellion in that yet, but there's clearly something going on. So I'm on episode 4, I think now, possibly 5, however many have come out. 5 is next, and yeah, it's good. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, maybe I need to just have another run at it. I wanted to like it, but it was just, I don't know, a little disappointed, I think.
Are you doing Clarksons season 4?
Yep. Just watched episode 5 with the family.
Yeah, I think I've done 4 of them. He's been out in his new tractor. I don't think that's a spoiler.
Now 5 came out today.
Yep, so I haven't watched 5 yet, so I've done 4. It's good entertainment. His continuing struggles with councils and things like that are a trial to watch when you feel like he's doing a good thing. I mean, obviously he lives near you, so you must one of those councils you must share with him. One thing I did find interesting is I saw a story earlier this week about the expansion of the original farm. So if you go on Google Maps and you look out for where they started with a couple of farm buildings to what he's got now, and it's basically a building site. You know, it's more or less quadrupled in size since he bought it. That's a lot of spend on just that part of it, never mind what he's spending on the farm.
Well, he's got to spend his Amazon bucks, hasn't he? Because he got paid a fortune when they took Grand Tour to Amazon. And they did blow up his house, if you remember, with the Grand Tour, and he's then built a new one. But yeah, we quite enjoy it because it's super close to us. We drive near the pub that he ended up buying. So it's been quite interesting seeing his process of choosing the pub. And yeah, we do know some of those council people. So it was quite interesting to see that they didn't come off terribly well in the episode. And they did post on the BBC the next day saying that's not how it went and da-da-da-da-da. So they've also been a bit of pain there. But no, I'm enjoying it. It's great. And if you just take it as face value as entertainment, it's really good.
100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and just because I couldn't see it before, Murderbot 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, so not bad.
Yeah, I know. Maybe I need to go back to Murderbot.
Fountains of Youth.
So I put this in here because it's Apple TV Film. Apple TV Film seems a bit odd, but anyway, it's on Apple TV Plus. It's a film. It's called Fountain of Youth. It's by Guy Ritchie, he's director. It's got a great cast in it. As you can see, it's got John Krasinski, thank you, and it's got Natalie Portman. So I started watching it, quite enjoyed first half. It's a bit like The Mummy. It's got Domhnall Gleeson in it as well. He's very good. It's all right. I thought it was all right. I thought the ratings on here were a little harsh. The ending for me wasn't as good as it could have been, but I'd say the ratings should be more in the 50s, 60s. I didn't think it was as bad as this. I thought it was a plausible family sort of film. I quite enjoyed it. And what did dawn on me, though, it's quite hard to spot a Guy Ritchie film. You know, like when you see a Christopher Nolan film, you kind of know what you're getting into. But it's not like that with Guy Ritchie. He does quite different films, I find.
I don't know, Lock, Stock and Snatch are definitely from the same universe.
They're from the same person, but then if you look at the body of work he's done since then, there's quite a lot of different stuff.
I don't know. I think not having seen all of his films, because I find Guy Ritchie quite tiresome, frankly, because of the formulaic sort of nature of them. And he did The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. What was it called? The one with, Superman. Henry Cavill in it. He did that as well.
The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
No, yeah, but not that. He's done another one since about
Okay.
World War II and stuff that I've talked about in the podcast. It'll come back to me. Maybe if I
Yes.
I probably got it wrong and he didn't direct it at all.
Click on Guy Ritchie, will tell us the
That's
answer.
just what I'm doing. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, that's it. And you could draw a straight line from Snatch to that, and that's many, many years later.
And yeah, okay. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah,
So that's interesting. Maybe he's got like 3 ways of doing films, and I've only watched a few of the films, so I haven't quite seen the repetitiveness of it yet.
I think he's just got geezers generally, hasn't he? I mean, maybe he hasn't found youth because it's John Krasinski, but geezers are his thing.
But Fountain of Youth, this is Apple's continued problem. They don't seem to be launching movies that people are grabbing. Like they did Wolves recently. There was Greyhound with Tom Hanks. There's this. They've had some of the great stars in them, but they haven't quite delivered on the promise. But I thought it was a good film. I quite enjoyed it. Am I going to watch again? Probably not. But equally, I didn't think it was 2 hours badly spent.
Maybe I'll give it a go. And I'm just going to do a PSA that the TT is on. So even people who don't like motorcycle racing, I think should just watch a little bit of the TT. And the thing I've posted to in the show notes is the fastest lap ever from last year by Peter Hickman. And anybody who puts this on will think this is speeded up in the first few seconds, but it's not. That's the actual speed that they go at. Or at least Peter Hickman goes at anyway. As I say, this is it's a 14-mile track, and he averaged 137 miles an hour, I think.
Jeez.
And it's just on the roads. It's all one way and there's no traffic coming the other way. But it's still got lampposts, it's still got pubs, it's still got spectators sticking their heads out and all the rest of it. And it's 17 minutes of your life to watch this. But you'll almost believe a man can fly. And how anybody can maintain this level of concentration and know a track like that at that speed just boggles my mind.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same. It's supposed to be just mentally draining and physically, because obviously you're hanging on to a bike that's going to be weighing quite a lot. But just the concentration, the drain on it, I can feel it now.
But I'm going to stop it in a minute because we'll get a content strike. But you can see how much he's moving around on the bike to have to do it. A bike is a very physical thing. You have to hang off it. You're fighting it all the time. You don't just sit there like you do in a car. You're up against the elements and wind and everything. And again, just watch it and look how close he gets to curbs and walls when he's doing it. But anyway, the TT is on. It might be worth spending a little bit of your time just watching the wrap-ups of the day because it's something that's going to go away soon. There's no way in the modern world they're going to let people keep flinging themselves around this track at the speed that they do.
He's clearly at one with his machine there, isn't
he? Just an incredible skill. Should we do a couple of games?
Yeah, let's do it.
And that's not a helpful link because that's about Pocket shutting down for the Nintendo Switch 2, which is quite annoying, so I might have to go and find that link. Tell us about the Nintendo Switch 2 and USB mice while I go and find that.
So you can use the Nintendo Joy-Cons, I was trying to remember the name of them, as a mouse, and it appears that you can just use a mouse as a mouse on the Nintendo Switch 2, as a surprise to nobody. So it's quite interesting. They've gone after console in your hand, console in the telly. It feels like they're going after console at your desk. So it's quite cool, I guess. I assume you can probably just plug a keyboard in. You're going to dock this like you would your laptop and game on your monitor in the corner rather than being on the big telly. I don't know. It just seems really interesting where Nintendo go. They're going after all forms of input, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're going to have mice, because you wouldn't want to use one of these Joy-Cons as a mouse for any sort of extended period of time. I wonder what sort of games it's going to be, though, because the worry for me about part of Nintendo's shtick is that they have got innovative and interesting control methods. Yeah, they've got joypads and all the rest of it. If you think back to the Wii and the motion controllers, that was something they did. And the Switch had a little bit of that too. The Joy-Cons come off, you can wave them around and all the rest of it.
But does anybody ever do that?
You're just plugging in a mouse. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What got me though is I forgot. Every time I pick up the Switch, and I did set one up recently, I always forget the screen's touchscreen. I always forget about it because I never use it. It's just not the way I interact with it, and I don't want fingerprints all over it. And I wonder if mice will be the same thing. Am I going to forget I can use it as a mouse? That's
really interesting because so is the Steam Deck. It's also a touchscreen. And very occasionally when it presents a keyboard to you, I do remember it's got that. But most of the time you're just using the controllers attached to it.
Yep, agreed. And that's how the Switch is for me.
F1 2025.
So this comes out today. We have it. We've played it. It's pretty good. If you like F1, it's all right. We didn't buy last year's, but we bought one 2 years ago, so we thought it was time to get a refreshed version with the updated teams, graphics, etc., etc. Not cheap, but possibly worth waiting a couple of weeks or months until it comes down. But me and my son had a quick 2-play around Barcelona, which is the race this weekend. It was good fun. So there you go.
Our Formula One games, like football games and other games, where basically they just change the paint on them and it's more or less the same game every year.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's a bit boring. I guess what can you do?
This one does have a story mode as well that you can do, but I struggle to get emotionally attached to that.
Fair enough. I haven't played any games this week, I'm sorry to report. It's unusual for me.
I beat you for 1 week. 52 weeks in a year, Chris takes one where he's played something and Rod hasn't.
Well done. Well done. Should we do a main show?
Let's do it.
So we thought we're going to mull over WWDC and things, aren't we? That's kind of our intention.
Yeah, and I thought we should look at this in 2 ways. One, just a little bit around Apple and maybe how they're going to tackle developer relations, and 2, what we're looking forward to in what we've heard about the OS updates.
Yeah, all right. So I think that's fair. And I think we can sort of inform this discussion by going through one of John Syracuse's pieces, talking about Apple turnaround. So did Apple turn over a couple of weeks back, which we also featured. But it's all very well saying it's broken, but could you give any recommendations on how to fix it? And part of that, as he is a developer and a long-time Apple watcher, that he's got some fairly thoughtful commentary around this. And I think what he talks about under the headline "A New Deal for Developers" is interesting and won't surprise anybody that's been listening to our podcast, really, that the iPhone caused a lot of excitement when it came out. Developers were delighted to get on board. They'd have paid any price to get on board just because it was where all the new cool stuff was happening. And they even tried to get an app store before there was an app store, if you'll recall. Before the app store was a thing, a couple of things had been released that actually managed to make use of unpublished APIs and people were able to write to it. Even when Steve Jobs was saying, all you really need for this is web apps for the future. Do you think that Steve Jobs would have been happy with them linking out, considering at one point he never thought there would need to be an iOS app store at all? Anyway, fast forward to 2025, and after the SDK was released in 2008, and we have a 15 to 30% tariff on things, developers aren't happy, and I think that's been sort of really obvious from the outset.
Yeah, this is it. Developers aren't happy, and John's trying to come up with some good ways of changing maybe their perception. And I put this in the comments. Are Apple going to acknowledge the room? The mood in the room. But then part of me thought, are they even aware of the mood in the room? Do they even care? And it certainly feels like over the last X number of years, Apple don't care about the mood in the room with the developers. They just keep turning up and cranking their hand on the new OSs and the new updates, and the developers will just carry on as they were, which is getting a bit frustrating now because it does feel like Apple need to acknowledge it, even if they just acknowledge it in their way of going, we've got this great new idea, we're going to do this and do this and do that, and it's everything we've all wanted, and they just claim it as their ideas, which is fine, but it feels like they're not even going to do that.
I think this is what you see with the Vision. I nearly said Vision Express. That's a glasses shop in the UK with the Vision Pro. That John says it well. The money is a thing, but it's not just money. It's about respect. It's about being treated as equals and being valued for the work that they do on the platform. And the whole uncertainty around the App Store isn't just that if I build an app, I'm losing 30% of my income or 15% of my income. It's you don't even know if the app's going to be allowed to be released. App review is part of that. The sort of fickle nature of, will this get released? Will I have to phone my journalist friends to get this? Am I using some API that Apple doesn't like today? Is it link out rules? It's not just money, it's respect and app review and the whole thing that comes with it. And fundamentally the way that Apple treats developers. And you see that with they used to do a big video at the start of WWDC with all the cool stuff and all the money they'd given to developers over the years and all the rest of it. And I think developers got a bit suckered in by that. Whereas now, I think Apple is the steam press that crushes all their dreams. For that advert that was very in poor taste last year.
For the iPad Pro.
For the iPad Pro. That's the way developers feel they're being treated. Apple is the steam press. It squashes their apps into one homogeneous blob and they take the money. And that is the feeling that you very much get in the community, that people are still making apps because that's how they get their living, a lot of the people. But what they're also seeing is their potential amazing ideas, that passion they had for the iPhone, being very much restricted by the thought that they may never get this. Apple won't allow this. for whatever reason. They can't link out to some cool API from the service because they won't let it. They can't have an innovative payment system or come up with an innovative payment system because Apple won't let them. They won't be able to make use of some open source piece of software because Apple won't let them. And they'll have wasted a load of time doing this. And that's it. And then, John goes into more detail that developers would care about, like filing radars, bugs, bug tracking. If you do file a radar if you find a bug with the software, Apple want you to do a radar to reproduce it, and there's no faith whether these things are actually followed up. And the whole developer relations piece is a mess, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I think that is fair. For as much as Apple does do developer relations, it's not really a two-way street, is it? They've really struggling with that two-way engagement. They don't charge developers a huge amount, and in some ways that's open up the door for lots of developers to join, but it does feel like they could do with different tiers, and have different grades maybe, so you can get more support, more help, more engagement. But it feels like all the good and innovation that the App Store brought however many years ago now, 2008 I think it launched, it's also stifled a lot of creativity and innovation. It was so good to begin with, and then as time's moved on and the world's matured, it's then stifled a huge amount, which is really frustrating.
But they're very slow, aren't they? They're very slow, and at the same time, they roll on like a steamroller. Every year they bring out a new version of the OS, pick your OS of choice, with a couple of fairly minor features, let's face it. The last few years, we haven't been impressed at all. In fact, we've reported that installing the betas almost makes no difference. Do you remember when things would completely break because some app-breaking bug, different visualizations, different APIs and the rest of it? They're long gone. Now all we get is minor iterations and a bit of continuity features and some intelligence stuff that doesn't work. So that lack of respect for developers also goes to end users as well, whereas all they want is a couple of things they can put on a marketing sheet to say they've updated the operating system. Apple used to take a year's break, Mountain Lion, Snow Leopard, where they would go, oh gosh, we've raced too far ahead with the APIs, we've raced too far ahead, we've got massive bugs that we need to patch. I think developers would really appreciate that. A bit of respect and a stable platform on which to build, not just everything Swift UI now, and you've got that sort of homogenous look no matter what the app is.
I think equally end users aren't that bothered. Do you not think? Like I talk to my family, they're like, why do I need the latest version? It's like, well, vulnerabilities and stuff, and it's good to have it. But ask them what they got out of iOS 18. Probably nothing, really.
Or 17.
Or 17, because Apple Intelligence didn't really bring anything. I'm trying to think what we use that's in the new OSs. There's just nothing really there, is there?
iOS 18 was dead on arrival because it was all Apple Intelligence. We were promised a bunch of things down the line, all of it Apple Intelligence, all of which turned out to be, fictional.
Yeah, it was fictional, but marketed as if it was real, which was worrying. So I'm super curious to see, are Apple gonna just start the conference with a bit of, we hear you, we are going to do, we're going to do these 10 things to improve how we foster developer relationships. I don't know.
Yeah. There's too much here to unpack. A premium experience for premium prices doesn't go in the direction you'd expect it to. People pay a lot of money for Apple hardware. That's the direction I expect it to go to. You want, if you buy a Rolls Royce, you want Rolls Royce service. Maybe not a good example. Rolls Royce aren't great cars. If you buy a very expensive BMW, you expect BMW service because you pay a lot for the servicing and you pay a lot for the car. But as a consequence, you hopefully get an incredibly reliable car that does everything that it says on the tin. You're a BMW owner, or were a BMW owner. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair.
You
buy a premium product because you want a premium experience.
Yeah, you spend more on a MacBook Pro because you think it's going to have a better battery, go faster, etc., etc. You buy an iPhone Pro Max because it's got the best camera, blah, 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 blah. And it does have really good hardware, but it doesn't have really, really good software anymore. And I think that's a significant problem.
I would agree with you. Or it's buggy or, unreliable. And the problem is the OSs do so much now and they move on at such a pace. If you remember the times when we used to get OSs and it'd be every couple of years and you'd get, a lot less features, whereas we're in a very different place now. It's every year and the handle's just cranking and cranking and cranking.
And it's worse than ever because they now add features piecemeal over the course of the version releases. When Snow Leopard would drop, you'd got everything in day one. There might be a few bugs and things, but you wouldn't think, we're not going to add DVD burning, whatever we did back in the Snow Leopard days, until the point 3 version of that. So I do think there's a tension between, we can just fix it, we'll chuck it down the road.
And I can kind of see why they've moved to the gradual updates, because they were struggling to get everything out on day one and it would be buggy. So what they've done makes sense.
But does it? Because they can't walk and chew gum at the same time, because there are OS breaking bugs that are still there at the end of the version. They immediately have to move on to building the next thing when the last thing's not finished. And all I need to say to justify that is Control Center, or System Settings as it is now, which is a disaster of an app.
Yeah, it's not good on the Mac at all, is it?
Or your window overview thing, I can't remember what it's called on iPad OS.
Stage Manager. An absolute disaster of a feature. So are Apple going to acknowledge this?
No. And I think that moves on to our sort of second point, that even John Gruber finally spoke up about this, didn't he? That he had, the something rotten in the Apple was basically what he was saying. And he's been the ultimate Apple. We've called him on this podcast a couple of times. He's the ultimate Apple pundit, but also the ultimate Apple shill.
Yeah, 100%.
Not shiller, but shill.
It did feel like he was on their payroll every now and again. And he's obviously not on their payroll anymore.
Well, he did that post, something rotten in Apple. He was sad that he didn't pick up the demos for Apple Intelligence were fictional, and that's where a lot of this started. And it was that point where he realized that his narrative changed, because before that he was very anti-EU, pro-Apple, Apple can do no wrong. You'd get a minor thing like maybe he'd say the keyboard wasn't very good, but that was a well-understood thing. But at the point he actually started criticizing the company, something has obviously changed. So since 2015, he has had a post-keynote called talk show episode where he's had Apple executives and some fairly senior Apple executives, Craig Federighi and et al., on his couch. It's not happening this year. There's no Apple executives coming at all.
Which I think is a bad look for Apple, because that was a good impartial forum. They never announced anything, but it was good forum. It was lighthearted. I think it's a bit of a shame they're not doing it, and I think they're continuing to put the wall up between Apple and the community.
I don't think it was a good forum. I think he softballed every single question at them because he might have been on their payroll. All you got was talking points from them that they'd already talked about in the keynote. It's not like he was asking them the tough questions there.
And there were no tough questions, and they'd obviously been vetted beforehand.
What John Gruber was allowed to ask them was he had to stick to the script, didn't he? And at the point I stopped watching the live talk show was when he came out with the Playdate in his pocket. Do you remember that one? And it was so cringy and hard to watch just from the get-go. And then he softballs all the questions to the executives, and I was just like, I'm out. And in fact, I stopped listening to it at that point as well. John has become interesting again, and I think his writing has improved again since he started being critical of Apple. And I think I don't really include us in this because we have no power when it comes to our podcast compared to others. But I think it's important for Apple's fans to be, as John Syracuse is, critical of what they do, and not just, they're great, and slavishly follow the finances and the products and just say they're a perfect company and can do no wrong, because they very, very clearly aren't at this point.
You only get better if you listen to your criticism. You don't get better by ignoring it, do you?
Well, you've said repeatedly, Apple have to compete, and the fact that they've got no competition and they've been able to build these walls has led us to the situation where I am less excited than I've ever been for WWDC.
I think I'm mixed on it. I think part of me is excited because I love all the updates. I love getting everything for free. You can just go and play with it, download the betas. And I've always enjoyed that, even when I used to have to do one at a time because I didn't have enough internet to download them. And I'm also a little interested because I've started doing some developing and I'd like to do some more. So in one hand, I'm interested, but in the other hand, it's hard to get behind something that you don't necessarily 100% believe in.
It is. It's difficult. And my sort of perspective on trying different laptops, trying Android phones, trying not to use as much American. Somebody said, "I don't have your scruples, Rod." When I talked about this when I went out for a curry last week, I thought that's an interesting way to put this, isn't it? Am I over moralizing what I'm doing, or is this a rational reaction? I genuinely don't. It makes you question yourself.
You got to vote with your feet, haven't you?
You do, and I think this sort of comes back to what we started talking about. Are you going to rush out and buy an iPhone in September?
Maybe. I don't know. It depends if they take my fancy.
I mean, that's the same answer you give every year, isn't it? And then you'll go, oh, there's some little feature in the camera that I must have. And let's face it, they incrementally improve. But even moving from, you skipped 2 years, didn't you? And then you bought a new phone. Do you see that much different?
Yeah. No, you don't. I think often you buy it and you're like, oh, right, it's the same old piece of glass and doesn't do much different. I fired up my old M1 iPad from the other day and I was like, this isn't much different than my M4 iPad.
It's funny. I was messing around with an M1 MacBook Pro, and exactly the same. It's fast. It's got a long battery life, and actually the M3, M4s are a little faster. But genuinely, for day-to-day operations of everything that you want to do, what's that now? A 5-year-old computer?
The M1, yeah.
It's a 5-year-old computer. If I pick up a 5-year-old PC, you can see a difference in 5 years. A 5-year-old Mac is. You can't. I genuinely think the M4 isn't that much better than the M1.
No, I don't think it's night and day. I don't think it is at all. It's a great device, but it's very iterative.
So that brings it back to sort of my thoughts are, this is about software, and I want Apple to acknowledge that they've lost a lot of standing with the community, not just with developers, primarily with developers, but I think with the public as well. The public, particularly the European, British, Brazilian, non-US public, think about the company in a different way now, and they have a chance in a very public forum where lots of people, and again not just developers, watch the keynote. My family, my kids ask me, oh, what was announced normally this year, because they know there's generally something that might be interesting. Oh, we're going to get new emojis, we're going to get something that would be relevant to them. It makes them sound very shallow, but that's what teenagers are like.
My kids are the same.
Yeah, that they want to know if there's something big they need to think about, and I think this is their chance to do something. Otherwise, people are going to look elsewhere. We just went through a whole episode saying it may be the AI, one app to rule them all is a possibility. Although I can't stand the thought of that.
Agreed.
Apple, they need to show they're willing to cave on some of these things. They can't just sail through another year and not mention it. This has been building. I'm sure we said similar things last year. Surely they're going to talk about with the EU, or they're going to the side loading and didn't the year before. So
the year before they didn't touch any of the EU stuff, and they just did it off piece, didn't they? Like 6 months later, and announced it, and it will be ready at this date. And it was all a bit odd. Whereas what I'd love to see them do is come out the dates, goes, right, we're harmonising the App Store across the globe. We're going to allow everything that's been allowed, and we're going to stop fighting all these stupid court cases and focus on being the platform of choice, because they are squandering their lead, aren't they? They've got all these loyal customers and fan base, and they're going to end up in a position where people go elsewhere because it's like, well, I'm just going to go over here because I can do what I want on that device.
Yeah, and meanwhile, if Gemini is really good and people are into AI, they're going to go and buy an Android, because that's going to do everything they want them to. We haven't linked to it in this thing, but I sent you a link in the week to a new app called Sky that integrates with the Mac, that will let you do things. It looks at Windows and it'll do interesting things based on your text base. It's basically what Apple Intelligence was promising last year. But it's actually doing it. It's a thing. Federico Viticci's had access to it, and it will actually do it. It's not for me. I'm not giving ChatGPT or Claude access to my desktop at that deep a level. But the potential of what it can do, that's the first time I've looked at an AI thing and thought, actually, I kind of get it.
How can a small company outside of Apple do that before Apple? That's the question.
Well, it's the same developers that came up with shortcuts.
But Apple have promised we were getting this, and they haven't delivered it, whereas a small company's gone out and done it.
Because they're too slow. All they care about is the amount of dollars in their bottom line. And that's the fundamental problem here, is they're not looking at us, and they're not doing the Steve Jobs things of what is the best product I can get, and I'm going to win based on the best product I can get. They're doing it on what's the most income I can get from this thing, and how long could I hang on to it.
Yep, no, agreed.
Obsessed with the market. Do you want to talk about any of the features, or do you think we've kind of done the deal?
I was just going to briefly just touch on a couple of very minor bits. I won't go too long. So we're hopefully going to get a new look, which I'm a little looking forward to. Like, how is a new look going to apply to my Mac, to my phone? And I'm using my Mac more than ever. So I'm just curious to see what does that look like. Because the Mac, that's a little wildly different than it did 20 years ago. So I'm curious to see what they do there, if it's anything or is it nothing. Interested in that. We're going to get captive network sync as well, which is a minor thing, and they could have dropped in a point update, but I think that would be kind of useful. Then we're going to get, possibly, it feels like we're going to lose a load of Intel chip support. So it does feel like you're going to, at some point soon, need an Apple Silicon to run it. So there are a few exceptions. So that's just a general feeling in the room. I am worried they're going to stop supporting the XR because a lot of my family members have XRs. That's my one concern there. Then in iOS, iPadOS, I was thinking, well, what we got? We've got Stage Manager updates coming. Hopefully they're going to do Stage Manager 2.0 and it's going to be amazing. Curious to see what that is because obviously you get that on the iPad, the Mac, and it's in Vision. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. You may get some form of Stage Manager when you plug your phone into a monitor, which again might be good for people. They're in London, they've gone to an office to work, they haven't got their laptop with them, they just plug their device in and do stuff with it. Interesting that. I want to know whether CarPlay is going to get an update. Love CarPlay. But it feels like it needs a visual. If they're refreshing everything else visually, CarPlay's screaming for something, isn't it? Screen's got a lot bigger since it was conceived. Are we going to get proper interactive widgets? Why can't my widget that shows the music I was last playing give me next and previous buttons and do all of that sort of thing? It feels like that should be there. Why can't Apple make that work? So I'd like to see that. There's talk of a floating tab bar, which sounds interesting, but then when you think about the practicalities of it, it feels like I wonder how that's going to work, because when you scroll to the bottom of content, what you're going to show underneath the tab bar is every page going to get a little bit longer. Then there was talk of AI battery mode, so we're going to have intelligent battery modes. That sounds like we should get that. What dawned on me since owning my MacBook is the battery on my MacBook is insane. And I remember the time, and I'm sure you do, when we all looked at the iPad and go, how does the iPad get 10 hours? My MacBook gets 2. And now the MacBook's getting like 20 hours and the iPad's still getting 10. Like, how's that's completely pivoted and turned on its head. So I'm curious to see what that's going to look like. And I think that's probably the thing everybody wants is how do we get better battery life? Because batteries still aren't there, even just to last a day. And then other than that, I haven't really got much else to talk about. tvOS, hopefully we're getting an updated look on that, which I would like because I use tvOS all the time. I'm probably one of the biggest tvOS users I know. So I always like it when that gets a bit of love. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the updates. I haven't really thought too much about what they might bring for developers, but obviously I'm playing in that space a little bit and I'm curious to see what they're going to bring.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest thing for developers will be the AI piece. The whole vibe coding has taken over the world, hasn't it? So, and they promised some sort of integration with Apple Intelligence and Xcode, and it never happened.
Are they even going to mention AI?
I think it'd be a big move if they didn't.
I think it'd be very telling if they didn't, or if they just go, we're not talking about AI today, but we will do in 6 months' time.
No, surely, all you do, we're in danger of going long here, very long. Surely all you do is you go, okay, we haven't done, Apple Intelligence is still coming, we've got a few things to tweak. In the meantime, if you flip this switch, you can have Gemini, if you flip this switch, you can have OpenAI, if you flip this switch, you can have Claude, or you can run your own thing on Olama. There you go, crack on. And that would solve the problem for them, because they make really good devices for an AI developer. If you buy a Mac Studio for whatever they are, $8,000, it can run some of the largest models.
Yep.
So the hardware is great, and it just keeps coming back to the software. And the WWDC show is a software show. This is your chance, Apple. Don't let us down.
Yes, it's for developers. I always get annoyed when it becomes a hardware release show. It's like, no, this is for developers.
Yep,
I think they brought the HomePod out at WWDC, which was an odd place to do it.
The Mac Pro I'm fine with. You can drop a Mac Pro because it's a big machine that's beefy that developers might use. But other than that, nope.
Even then, I'm not sure most developers are using a Mac Pro these days because it's so expensive.
Well, the Mac Studio or even the Mac Mini, frankly, these days is probably a good enough machine for most people. But again, I'm just going to reiterate that this is really important now, Apple. I think you're not at an Elon Musk moment, but people are paying attention now in a way that they never have before. The last few devices haven't been great. The last few software updates haven't been great. And Apple Intelligence has been, I'm going to be generous, an unmitigated disaster that's brought some stupid emojis and some absolutely rubbish grammatical checking. So AI is where it's at. You're not skating to where the puck is, as Chris said earlier. So time to sort it out.
Agreed. So I think I'm probably looking forward to WWDC slightly more than you, but not as much as I normally do.
Yeah, it's the shine is coming off.
Yeah, 100%.
App of the week.
Do it.
App of the week is Fiery Feeds. So I know you're a big fan of Reader.
I love it.
But I now self-host my own RSS feeds. So I use Fresh RSS for that. It's quite nice to an iOS or Android version of that. This is iOS in this case. It's called Fiery Feeds. It's got really good integration with all manner of services. Feedly, Feedbin, Fever, InnoReader, NewsBlur, Bazco's, Old Reader, Feed, blah, blah, blah. The one I use is Fresh RSS, which is a self-hosted one, and that's there. You can add your Read It Now links for Pocket, which is going away, as we talked about, and others. It's just a really nice, well-done app with beautiful, very iOS-like that you can swipe through, get to your feeds, syncs instantly with the server. I'm really impressed with it. I quite like the visual style of it. And it tells me how many I've got left to read, Chris, which I think is really important in a reading thing.
I just go to the timeline and then you just keep reading until you get to the top.
No, but you want to know, am I going to be here for 3 minutes or am I going to be here for 3 hours?
It does now show you in the top right how far down the list you
are. I have moved on. Fiery Feeds for me. Check it out.
Fiery Feeds. There's Rod's recommendation.
App of the week. Thing of the week even.
Thing of the week. So I've gone for old school MagSafe. So I recently bought a MacBook Air. It comes with MagSafe. MagSafe is, in the old days, how you used to charge, the only way you could charge your MacBook. And it snaps on, it's magnetic. It looks cool. Apple with their latest, I can't even show you the connector. I was going to put it up. Apple with their latest connectors have done them the same color as the device. So mine's in midnight blue. It's just great. Plug it in. And I've been a big USB-C fan, but I've actually gone and got another MagSafe cable just so I can have it in my desk down here, my desk up there. I just think it's fantastic. Just clip it on. You don't scratch anything. It's just such a great design. And this probably links slightly back to Johnny Ive at Apple 10 years ago, taking MagSafe away. Why would you do that? It was such a good thing, and it was great when they brought it back, and I'm glad they brought it back. It's such a good design. I kind of wish it was on my iPad. I just think it's really good, and it doesn't use up a port. So MagSafe, that's my thing of the week.
It's good technology, and for those that don't have it, there was ways that you could get MagSafe USB-C connectors to power, at least. It left you like an ugly stubby thing sticking out your USB-C connector, but people were very glad when they brought back MagSafe. For me, I had a MagSafe on my M1 for a long time, and it stayed coiled up in the bag because I'd carry my laptop to the screen would have USB-C, that would give me power and connection, and off I'd go. So I get it, but I think it's time. It's kind of passed. I like the fact it doesn't take up a port, I guess, but generally if I'm plugged in, I'm charging or I'm connected to a screen or something, so it doesn't mean much to me. Good on my phone. I think it's still called MagSafe on the phone. I like the magnetic pucks that I can connect my phone to when I'm in the car and with a good strong magnet on. But I kind of think, and considering I now run a Linux laptop, I ain't missing MagSafe. I mean, it's a useful technology for the clumsy, but that's about it.
That's why I love it.
A useful technology for the clumsy. And there we got our show title right at the end as well.
There you go, perfect.
I think we call that a show, Chris.
I think so. So if everyone wants to get in contact, Rod is at g5maniac at mastodon.scot. He's also on Blue Sky and he's at g5maniac at bsky.social. I'm on Mastodon. I am at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch on YouTube by going to our website and clicking on the YouTube link. And you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.